The cursor blinks on a black field in a Dallas office that sells the sky. Green letters stack into a language most passengers will never learn. A city pair, a cryptic booking class. The machine answers. A fare appears that will move a human body from Texas to Heathrow, and the person typing it is not an airline employee. Last night, the passenger saw the airline's own commercial, a wing over weather, a voice that said book direct. Airlines spend billions to make that invitation feel intimate. They still lose the expense of booking to a middleman whose interface looks like a relic. Sabre is the name on the relic. It does not own the aircraft, it does not pay the pilot. It sits in the path between a carrier and the travel agencies and corporate booking tools that still write the expensive tickets, and it charges for remaining in that path. Distribution fees, often $10 to $20 per flight segment, do not purchase jet fuel. They purchase the right to be seen inside a network the industry cannot seem to route around. Listen to the silence around that fee. No commercial mentions it. The camera stays on the wing. Do not misread the wound.
Airlines sell millions of seats on their own websites. Direct sales are real. Leisure weekend fares often never touch this layer. The paradox lives in the indirect channel. The agents, the company travel desks, the booked-for-you itineraries, which remains the highest yield slice of the market. A market report dated July 31st, 2026, still finds Sabre and Amadeus controlling about 79% of the global GDS market and processing more than 1.5 billion reservations a year. The contradiction is colder than nostalgia. Carriers invented these systems, spun them into separate companies, then signed agreements that can keep an airline website from posting a lower price than the same seat on Sabre. They spent a fortune teaching you their logo. They still pay a 1960s software layer for the booking they wanted to own. Why does a gatekeeper this old still price the modern ticket?
In 1953, a storm of paper reservations buried American Airlines. The industry likes to begin with a chance conversation between the carrier's president, C.R. Smith, and an IBM man who knew SAGE, the military air defense computer. The flourish may be polished. The project was not. IBM and American built Sabre, the semi-automated business research environment, and by 1964 it ran as a live spine, a private ledger for one fleet, a machine paid for by a company that wanted its own seats to stop lying. That origin is famous. The decade that mattered is the one that made the ledger other people's problem. Through the 1960s and early 1970s, a travel agent spent a working life on the telephone. Hold music was inventory. Clerks walked boards of cards. In 1976, Sabre put terminals into agencies it did not own. United pushed Apollo into the same rooms. Other American carriers grew computer reservation systems with names that sounded like weapons programs. Europe answered in 1987, when Air France, Lufthansa, Iberia, and SAS founded Amadeus, so European inventory would not have to live as a guest inside a Texas computer. WorldSpan later tied Delta, Northwest, and TWA into another pool.
Each owner wanted its flights sorted high on a stranger's display. Power on a display attracts a state. In 1984, the Civil Aeronautics Board issued bias rules that the Department of Transportation inherited. An airline that owned a reservation system could not bury a rival under convenient fog. The government treated the screen as something closer to a public square. The asset remained a private firm. Public duty, private rent. That fracture is still the building. Once the systems were too useful to kill and too profitable to keep as a cost center, finance did what finance does. The airlines spun the pipes away from themselves. Sabre became a vendor that invoiced the parent that had imagined it. Amadeus reported like any software house. Galileo and WorldSpan were folded into Travelport. The inventors woke as customers. By the 2000s, the former cost center was negotiating with the former owner as a peer, and sometimes as an adversary. They were not buying a storefront. A global distribution system is a switch with three faces.
Carriers file schedules and fares in a stubborn common language, often through publishers such as ATPCO, so a booking class typed in one city means the same thing in another. Agents query that pile because a single command set can see hundreds of airlines at once.
Corporate travel platforms plug into the same switch because a company's rules, who may sit in business class, which chain is preferred, who must be found in an emergency, were written on top of GDS connections years earlier. Abandon any phase and the other two collect a penalty. Pull inventory and the agent, paid to be fast, books whoever still answers inside the familiar syntax. Walk away as an agency and you lose the long tail of smaller airlines, plus the corporate accounts whose software will not speak a boutique interface. Rebuild the corporate stack and you retrain a workforce and recertify managers who live in exception reports. The lock-in is not one signature, it is a triangle. Cash follows the triangle. Airlines pay for the reservation that lands. Agencies take incentives, frequently counted per segment, to park their volume on one switch instead of another.
Corporate buyers stay for the audit trail, not the romance. Sabre's market profile has described the arrangement in the blunt vocabulary of access fees and agency networks. Amadeus, in its 2024 Management Review and Financials, put a number under the vocabulary. More than 1.2 billion reservations in a year, moving through systems a passenger will never log into. Airlines built apps anyway. They still could not delete the workflow installed in other people's offices. A Saturday leisure hop can die on a phone. A 12-passenger, 3-city, refundable, policy-compliant itinerary does not. It lives where the commands already work, where a change can be reissued without inventing a new language at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. People keep expecting the GDS to yellow like a paper brochure. It was a labor device, then a company. The opening contradiction is a bill for that choice. Follow the people who still need the switch, because the switch is not a ghost, it has a payroll. Incentives do not float, they sit in chairs. Inside Sabre, the motive is not romance for 1960s code, it is density. Every additional agency desktop that lives in the command language makes the next airline more afraid to vanish. Every additional airline that dumps a full set of fares makes the next agency less willing to learn a second grammar. Public filings talk about network access and distribution partnerships in the calm voice of software. The obsession underneath is simpler. Do not be the pipe a high-yield ticket can route around. The airline distribution executive lives a split life. Marketing is built for a direct relationship, a clean app, a customer file that does not belong to a vendor. Revenue management is built for the corporate account that pays a refundable fare at dawn and changes it twice. That account does not browse. It instructs a travel management company, American Express Global Business Travel, BCD, CWT, and their peers, to keep a human being legal, findable, and on policy. The executive can give speeches about Direct Connect. The executive still signs a participation deal because the consultant's ticket is the ticket that funds the quarter. Disappearing from the default screen is not a branding problem. It is a share shift problem that shows up before lunch. The agent on that default screen is not a villain in a morality play. The agent is paid for speed and for not making a mess. A command that has been in the fingers since training will beat a prettier portal that fails on a code share, a seat map, or an involuntary reroute. Agencies also collect those segment incentives. Loyalty is not mystical. Loyalty is arithmetic. Stay on the system that pays you to stay, and that already contains the odd regional flight your client will ask for at 6:12 p.m. Then there is the corporate travel manager, the quiet character who decides more fares than any advertisement. This person answers to finance and to security. If a storm closes a hub, someone must know which employees are on which metal. If a regulator asks why a vice president sat in first class, someone must produce a rule. The booking tool, Sabre's Get There in many histories of this market, SAP Concur in many modern offices, a thicket of others, is less a store than a courthouse. It records consent. It records refusal. It records the exception. A few decisions locked their motives together. American commercialized the terminal and later lived with a vendor it no longer commanded. Sabre paid to keep desktops loyal rather than merely connected. Airlines accepted participation terms because the alternative was a blank line where a fare should have been. Travel management companies built their entire product on being fluent in one switch instead of 50 boutique pipes. Each choice was locally rational. Each choice made the next defection more expensive. None of these people is paid to make the passenger understand the bill.
They are paid to survive the next irregular operation. Watch that incentive long enough, and a strange piece appears. The airline resents the bill. The vendor defends the network. The agent defends the syntax. The corporation defends the audit. 4 resentments, 1 equilibrium.
The peace lasts until a carrier tries to keep a cheap fare for itself. In the early 2000s, the public internet finally looked like an escape hatch. Airlines posted web-only prices, lower than the numbers sitting in the switches, and waited for passengers to come home. Agencies saw the undercut. Corporate tools could not reliably display the cheaper public fare. The vendors answered with a contract structure the industry still calls full content. The offer was not subtle. Give the GDS every publicly available fare, including the website fare, and pay a better booking rate. Hold inventory back and pay more, or risk worse place in the very workflow the high-yield customer uses. Some versions went further. They pressed the airline not to undercut the GDS price on its own site. A marketing department could still shout "book direct." The contract could still forbid the direct channel from winning on price. That is not a rumor in a form. It is a participation term. Access is the product. Full content is how access stays complete. Airlines signed. Then they seethed. The first loud revolt that the public could hear came from Frankfurt. On September 1st, 2015, Lufthansa Group began adding a surcharge to tickets issued through the traditional GDS channel, widely reported at €16, while pushing buyers toward its own direct and NDC-based routes. Other carriers watched. Some copied a version of the surcharge. Agencies accused the airlines of punishing the clerks who still cleaned up irregular operations. The airlines accused the switches of charging for a pipe whose technology no longer matched the richness of a modern offer. Branded fares, bundles, bags, a seat that is not just a letter in a booking class. Into that fight walked a standard with a bland name. In 2012, IATA adopted NDC, New Distribution Capability, Resolution 787, an XML framework meant to let an airline shop and sell the way a retailer shops and sells. Continuous pricing, ancillaries, a conversation instead of a dusty fare family. The idealism was clean. If the old command language was a cage, a new language would be a door. Carriers invested. Pilot programs sprouted. The old cage was supposed to rust in public. Reality arrived with a purchase order. A travel management company does not want 55 direct connections, 55 outage phone trees, 55 ways to ticket, refund, and swap a passenger when a thunderstorm erases a bank of flights. It wants one workspace. So the GDS companies did what a threatened coordinator does. They did not die. They offered to carry NDC inside the same workspace. Aggregation. One screen. Old commands or new XML, same vendor invoice. The revolution became a product line. Watch a live booking in that hybrid present. An airline publishes a rich NDC offer, a fare that is supposed to exist only in the new world. The offer is scheduled to appear in the corporate tool. The tool still sits on a GDS backbone. The agent compares it against a traditional filed fare. The traveler is on a deadline. Present tense. No conference slide in the room. The cheaper or simpler path that actually tickets without a help desk ticket wins. Sometimes that path is NDC. Often it is whatever the aggregator's plumbing already trusts. The format changes, the coordinator does not. Lawyers moved in the gaps. American Airlines and Sabre spent years in court accusing each other of breach, retaliation, and abuse of the display. Allegations, not gospel, laid out in filings that read like a marriage falling down a staircase. Content was pulled and restored. Direct Connect was praised on earnings calls and then limited in practice to the agencies large enough to swallow the integration cost. Smaller agencies stayed where the incentive still cleared. Online travel agencies played both sides, taking airline money for direct links while remaining married to GDS completeness for the long tail. Dominoes fell in a crooked line. A carrier wins a press cycle for an NDC-only fare family. A corporate account demands the fare appear inside the mandated tool. The tool vendor says speak to the aggregator. The aggregator says speak to the airline about certification. Months pass. The fare exists, technically.
It does not exist where the highest yield buyer is allowed to click. The airline either feeds the aggregator or watches the fare die of ceremony. Feeding the aggregator looks a lot like the old world with better adjectives. And then the fee mutates.
It does not always vanish when the message format modernizes. It changes clothes. A booking fee becomes a technical connection charge, a shopping fee, a ticketing fee, a premium for full offer management. The airline's finance staff can show a slide where traditional GDS volume falls as a percentage. The same staff may be paying new entities, sometimes the same entities under a new SKU, to make NDC usable for the people who actually ticket. Savings appear in one column. Complexity opens another. Passengers feel this as a fog, not a line item. Two browser tabs disagree by $40, and neither explains the contract behind the disagreement. A web special is not special once the full content logic has dragged it back onto the professional screen, or else it is so special that the professional screen cannot see it, and therefore the company forbids it. The climax is not an explosion, it is an absorption. NDC was designed as a bypass. The bypass is now a lane on the same bridge. Direct Connect works for the giant accounts that can force the issue, and for leisure customers who were never the core rent.
The middle of the market, profitable, policy-bound, change-prone, remains a place where Sabre, Amadeus, and the thinner third pole can still charge for coordination. Leave the wound open. The industry did not fail to invent a modern language. It invented one, then discovered that the buyer of coordination will pay the old coordinator to translate it. Idealism built an API. Incentives built a toll booth in front of the API. The two now shake hands on stage and invoice each other off stage. The handshake is the climax. The invoice is the wound that does not close.
A ticket looks like a promise of aluminum and time. Peel it and you find a second promise, that a stranger in another city can find you, change you, refund you, and prove to a finance department that the change was allowed. That second promise is what the old switch actually sells. The flight is a commodity with wings. The coordination is the scarce object. Wings are plentiful compared with a shared truth about who sits where. This is the principle the story earns. In a three-sided market, the product is not the best interface. The product is the fact that the other two sides already arrived. Improve the interface and you have done homework. Empty one side and you have done suicide. That is why a format change can feel historic in a conference hall and modest in an invoice. The invoice is charging for the crowd. Prices tell on us when we let them. A passenger reads a fare as weather, a number that simply happened. A distribution executive reads the same fare as a stack. Metal, fuel, crew, airport, and a rent paid to keep the seat eligible for the desks that still move the profitable bodies. The rent is not a conspiracy. It is a bill for not forcing every corporation to become a software integrator. Ugly, durable, locally sane. Rational after the mechanism, absurd before it. Workers inherit the ugliness in different uniforms. The agent keeps a dying dialect alive because the dialect still prevents a missed connection from becoming a missed career. The airline staffer who was hired to cut distribution spends years certifying the new language so it can be spoken safely inside the old building. The corporate arranger becomes a referee between policy and the only tool that will not get them fired. None of them is free to love the mechanism. All of them are paid to keep it from failing on a Tuesday. Competitors try the obvious attacks. A new booking startup offers a prettier pane of glass. It wins a leisure niche, and then discovers it must still ask the coordinator for the long tail, or ask 100 airlines for pipes, or both. Another carrier tries to starve the switch, and learns that starving a switch is easy to announce and expensive to survive. The industry is not short of rebels. It is short of rebels who can move the audit-driven middle without becoming a GDS themselves. So the aftertaste is not that technology failed. Technology succeeded twice. First, it made reservation into a record. Then it made the record into a market with its own landlords. The landlords can be replaced only by someone willing to host the same three crowds at a lower rent without breaking the courthouse functions companies now treat as oxygen. Oxygen is not optional. That is a high bar dressed up as an app store. Stand in a concourse at dusk.
Look up. The board is a choir of delays. Departures flicker. A delay cascades. Somewhere a command is reissued, a passenger is reticketed, a duty of care ping goes out, and a fee is born that will never appear on the boarding pass. The jet is new. The rent is old. The market calls the sum a fare because the language of fares is simpler than the language of coordination. If a lower price on an airline's own site can be a contract violation, what exactly is the number on the ticket?